And guess what never came in the mail? The check. This is why Service Alberta didn't have any evidence. Everybody was sending it back to them and then filing a complaint. Now, the only reason I found out what was happening with that, Service Alberta didn't tell me that. Somebody that happened to was put in touch with me through one of the TV stations, and she explained what had happened. And I thought, oh, that's why they have no evidence. Don't ever pack up your contracts and send them back to anybody. So I filed a lawsuit against the club, and Service Alberta filed 125 criminal charges against Andre Muran, Royal Club International, Royal Club Resorts, and they also included RCI Canada in the lawsuit. Those charges were dropped against RCI. Anyway, long story short, Service Alberta puts out the media release, 125 charges, including charges for alleged misconduct involving timeshare and travel services, operating without a travel club license, which, as far as I know, they've never had a travel club license or a timeshare license, which we'll let Miles talk about. Yay, Miles. And misleading confusers, that's what we should call them. Misleading consumers and refusing to provide refunds when consumers attempted to cancel their contracts. So the charges were filed. It hit the media. Leah Williams-Doherty at CTV picked up the story here in Calgary. She ran a few stories way back then. And so Royal Club International had some bad press. So what do? Slide, please. That's Andre Muran, if anybody wanted to know what he looks like. Stop. Click. All right, so Royal Club International is out the window, and in comes, click again, CHEATauWorld. The offices remained the same. The staff remained the same. The telephone numbers remained the same. The only thing that changed were the signs outside. That was it. And they kept going. Slide. So in 2007, the story there, it's long. Andre Muran fired his defense team twice, 2 separate defense teams. The problem Andre Muran had was he had no defense. I was trying to commit fraud is not a defense. And so his lawyers kept saying, you've got to plead guilty, dude. We got nothing. And he fired the first team, and then he fired the next team, and then finally he took a plea bargain. And the plea agreement required that he pay back some money. And of all of the complaints that Service Alberta had received, they were only able to really go after, I think, 5 or 6 of them, because they have to have enough evidence to prove what they're going after them for. So, slide. So here's what they had to do. They had to pay back some money, and they had to sign an undertaking. This is the first page of the undertaking. And by the time this happened, they had already been operating under the name CHEATauWorld for a while, but you will notice, click again, right there, CHEATauWorld is included in the undertaking. The undertaking basically says, we promise we are never going to do this again. We were bad, and we will smarten up now. That's it. Slide. Oh, look, we're done. So, in my case, I ended up going to a pretrial conference, and that was the first thing that showed me the kind of people I was dealing with. Because we went into the pretrial conference room, and Andre Muran and his lawyer, Murray Smith, walked in. And the judge came and sat down. She was very nice. She was really sweet. I told her the whole story, and she said, okay, Mr. Muran, Mr. Smith, I want to hear your side of the story. And Murray Smith slammed his foot down on the table and said, Your Honor, we have tried to deal reasonably with these people, and they have been completely unwilling to cooperate. There's nothing we can do. You have no choice but to set a trial date. And the judge blinked and blinked again and said, Well, are you going to tell me what your defense is? And he said, No, we haven't decided what our defense is yet. And she said, Well, I'm not impressed that you don't know what your defense is going to be. He says, Oh, well, it'll be something like, they signed the contracts, and so they have to be held to the contract, something like that. And she said, You're serious? And he said, Yeah. So she set a trial date. First trial date, we go in, and Murray Smith announces to the judge, We're going to need 2 days for trial. We're only scheduled for 1. So we need 2 days. And the judge said, Fine. So he put it over. Now, there's a whole lot of other stuff that was happening in here. I got in big trouble because I used the term fraudulent misrepresentation. Apparently, in courts, you don't use fraud. Don't use the word. It's the F word. You don't use it. I didn't know. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't know. Anyway, so the judge came down on me for that, but that's a whole different thing. So he scheduled trial again for April 11th and 12th of the following year. Made it preemptive on both parties. That means it doesn't matter what happens, everybody's got to be there. We're doing it that day. So we went home, and within 2 weeks, I had a server at my door who handed me papers. Andre Muran and Murray Smith were suing me, countersuing me, for the money I had not paid on my contract. And they filed a $3.8 million defamation suit in Court of Queen's Bench because I had posted to a website called the Ripoff Report what had happened to me at CHEATauWorld. And they included as victims of my defamation several of their staff members, one of whom I recall I had said she was not the sharpest crayon in the box. I was interested to see how they would, in fact, prove she was the sharpest crayon in the box. At any rate, so now I've got 2 lawsuits pending, one of them for $3.8 million, which, my first response was I laughed because I knew that I had not defamed anybody. I was telling the truth. But then you get thinking about it, your mind plays games with you, and I started to pee a little bit because, $3.8 million was more than I've got anywhere. I could probably sell one of my kids, but, that's wrong too. So we continued forward, and I ran searches on the property at Banff. And at that time, I think it was 2006-ish, there was one title on the Banff property, just one. And it had pages of liens on the property from contractors who hadn't been paid, people who had done tens of thousands of dollars worth of work, and then they were told, yeah, we're not going to pay you. Just forget it. So I started to realize, even if I win my lawsuit, I'm never going to get my money back because all of these judgments, there were judgments also against the companies, reams of them, and nobody was getting paid. So I realized this is a loss. I'm never going to get my money back through this lawsuit. I consulted with a lawyer, and the lawyer said, yep, you are never going to get your money back. He said, contact Murray Smith, the lawyer. Tell him, look, let's just agree to withdraw from the case. Mutual withdrawal, no cost to either party. We'll just say done is done. Because it's just going to be a waste of the court's time. I said, okay. So I contacted Murray Smith. This was probably a couple weeks before trial. And I said, look, Murray, I've been running checks on the property, yada, yada. I realize there are judgments against Andre that go back 15, 20 years. Nobody's getting paid. Let's just agree to disagree and walk away. No cost to either party. And Murray Smith shouted into the phone, You, madam, have a personal vendetta against my client. I am not willing to discuss